Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Coalition for Housing Affordability's webinar this evening about accessory dwelling units. We're delighted that you have joined us. We're going to get started right away to ensure that we can have a good presentation as well as time for conversation afterwards. Just as in terms of context, to let you know kind of where we are in the process. Tonight we are going to be talking about a Zoning Regulation Amendment number 218. That will be a amendment to our current zoning code in terms of the calendar and the schedule. We have this is planned specifically for tonight because next Thursday night, October 16th, the planning board will be considering the ZRA, and its process is to then make a recommendation to the county council. And then after that, it is up to the county council, and it will, as we understand it, be it will be put on the council agenda for November. And keep this timeline in your thoughts as we go forward tonight. A little bit of logistics. So because we have so many people registered for this evening, to try to make it as efficient and to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to comment or ask questions, in your menu bar at the top, at the bottom, everybody has a little bit of different. There is a Q&A selection opportunity. If you will click that, put your question or your comment in that area that comes up, and then we will be monitoring that. And once we are through the presentation this evening, then we will come back to those Q&As and try to get through as many as possible. If we don't get to them all, we will do our very best to consolidate them and give responses as we can after the meeting. And also to let everyone know that this is being recorded. It will be available on the Coalition's YouTube channel, and that will come out, that link will come out to all of you after with the recap tomorrow. A quick reminder about who the Coalition is. We started about 7 years ago. We are grassroots. We are not a formal nonprofit. Our mission is very policy and education focused. So we monitor legislation at the local and the state level, and we review research and look for trends and best practices. This webinar is an example of the educational, what we consider part of our mission. And then we organize and we advocate, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. We currently have about 44 organizational members and a little over 1,000 individuals, members, and allies that support and have indicated an interest in the creation of affordable housing in the county.
Before we get into the detailed content, I just wanted to provide a little bit of context about what you're going to hear tonight. And the context is that we are dealing with a severe housing shortage in this country, and it's a national problem. We're short by millions of homes, starting in the Great Recession of 2008, 2009. The U.S. has consistently underbuilt housing compared to the demand for the housing. The Federal Reserve estimates that we're short by over 3 million homes, which is a staggering gap that affects affordability and availability of suitable housing across the country. And if we zoom in on Maryland, we're facing a shortage here too that's estimated between 96,000 and 150,000 homes. That higher estimate comes from the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development. And whenever you have a shortage like that, the competition for homes is intense. A personal story, my youngest son, who turns 34 tonight, as a matter of fact, or today, he and his wife were shopping earlier this year for a home in Howard County, and they were regularly competing with 40 and sometimes 50 other buyers who are actually putting in contracts on listings. And so with competition that intense, prices are necessarily going to rise. And here you see the impact on rents and home prices, which have increased far faster than income growth over the past 10 years. We don't rank well as it relates to uh, housing affordability or the cost of living. We're 43rd in terms of housing affordability. We have the ninth highest cost of all states, cost of living of all states. That's a tough combination. And the consequences for Maryland are significant. Renters are getting crushed with high rents. We're losing home ownership opportunities for families with moderate incomes. Our state economy has been stagnant for the last 7 years. And we're losing young adults who recognize that they might be able to survive in Maryland, but they'll have a better opportunity to thrive elsewhere. And in Howard County, the housing shortage is real, and it's forecasted to get even worse because we're not building enough homes for an expanding workforce. We're already short 20,000 homes, and we need about 30,000 more for workforce growth through the year 2040. And because of the shortage and the competition for homes, home prices have gone up, rents have gone up, as you can see from the data here. And on the receiving end of all of the data are the real people in our community who are getting hurt. Seniors, especially seniors who rent, are getting squeezed terribly. Ask the Office of Aging and Independence, who do their best to serve seniors in the community. They are hearing from a lot of seniors, both renters and homeowners, who are really struggling because of the high cost of housing. People with disability have an awful time finding affordable housing that's suitable for them. There's just hardly any of it in our county for people who have certain disabilities. Young adults are having trouble getting launched. Most of us know at least one family where a young adult is working but can't afford to move out of the basement. I think there are three within about 100 yards of where I am right now in my community. Young families can't find affordable home ownership opportunities, so they're not able to put down roots in a community that could use their energy and their talents. And essential members of our workforce, firefighters, teachers, paraeducators, nurses, and other healthcare workers, employees in construction, hospitality, retail. So many people are struggling to hang on or are deciding to move elsewhere if they can. And if you talk to business owners, you'll hear that many have trouble recruiting and retaining employees at the lower wage levels. So that's the context for tonight. And so that brings us to the discussion of accessory dwelling units or ADUs. An ADU is, by definition, is a small independent home that's located on the same lot as a primary home. It must have a separate entrance. It must have its own bathroom, kitchen, and sleeping or living areas. And no one is going to claim that ADUs are a complete solution for our housing crisis, but ADUs can help by expanding housing supply on existing land. We don't have to find or create existing land if such a thing were possible in order to add housing. ADUs are one way we can do it on the land that we already have here in the community. And so with that, I want to turn the microphone and the screen over to Linda Eisenberg, who is the director of the Department of Planning and Zoning in Howard County. And she's going to walk you through some of the details related to the Zoning Regulation Amendment that Jackie mentioned at the top of the show here. Take it away, Linda.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you to Jackie and Dana for having us here this evening. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen in presentation mode. All right. Is everyone seeing the presentation now?
Perfect.
All right, great. So again, thank you so much to Jackie and Dana, for having us here this evening. With me, I have Justin Tyler from Department of Planning and Zoning, as well as Jeff Delmonico on my staff who are here. So when we get to answering questions, they'll be helping me with some of that as well. They helped to draft the legislation. So as you know, before you, we have ZRA, which is our Zoning Regulation Amendment 218, accessory dwelling units and two-family dwellings. We are going before our planning board next Thursday, 2 Thursdays from now, on October 16th. So again, as Dana introduced, I'm Linda Eisenberg, the Director of Howard County Planning and Zoning. Here's my contact information. So in case we don't get to everything this evening, feel free to reach out to me, send me an email, and I'll get back to you with any additional questions that you may have. So again, what I'll cover this evening are the basics of House Bill 1466, which is one of the impetuses for this legislation at this particular time, as well as just some of the basics of covering our Housing Opportunities Master Plan, affectionately referred to as the HOMP, as well as HOCO by design. What is currently allowed for in Howard County's zoning ordinance for accessory dwelling units, and what is proposed in this zoning regulation amendment. And then Dana tested out the polling software that we'll be using. So we're going to do a little interactive poll, and busting some commonly held myths regarding accessory dwelling units, and then reserving some time at the end for questions and answers. So what is this House Bill 1466 and the law that was passed in 2025? So I'm just going to briefly go over, what this law did and how we're applying it to Howard County. So this past Maryland General Assembly legislative session that ended in April, under the land use and real property, accessory dwelling units, requirements and prohibitions law was passed. And it's referred to typically as House Bill 1466. So it requires jurisdictions as of October 1st of 2025 to enable this legislation. And they can be done, either by code or by policy. But we are doing this via, we already have a lot of this in place currently, but it requires them by October of next year via codification to enact this legislation, but you have to be able to be implementing it by October 1 of this year. So as of, 8 days ago. So you have to define accessory dwelling units in your zoning ordinance. You have to allow accessory dwelling units to be built on lot zone for single family detached housing. To set a size cap of 75% of the primary structure. You have to allow them to be separate or part of your single family detached residence. You have to exempt them from density calculations and residential growth limits. The legislation overrides other restrictions for accessory dwelling units. And you may not establish setback or other requirements that exceed the zoning districts in which the ADU would reside in. So for instance, whatever your base zoning is, you would use that base residential zoning district to establish what we call bulk requirements are. And then also in this legislation, homeowners associations and other deeds, declarations, or contracts cannot prohibit their development, or you cannot prohibit people from offering to rent those out, except for short-term rentals can be prohibited within the state legislation. And it requires the local jurisdiction to consider off-street parking as one of the considerations. And so if you go to the URL that I have provided here, that outlines what was in the bill, and then this was eventually adopted into law this past April. So piggybacking off of that, we've taken that and taken the law, and then we've also looked at what was in, the guiding plans that we have for housing policies within Howard County. And two of our guiding plans that we utilize to also work with this legislation that we're putting forward in this zoning regulation amendment is the Housing Opportunities Master Plan, which was done in 2021, and then our HOCO by Design, which was the general plan that was adopted in 2023. So I'm sure many of you are very familiar with these plans, and this is part of our implementation process for some of these housing policies. So these amendments are intended to expand housing choices and really promote affordability and support that aging in place and multi-generational living. What we're trying to do is reflect the county's commitment to implementing the general plan's housing goals. And aligning them with these two particular plans as I've described here, and working, combining these with HB 1466 for this legislation on accessory dwelling units. So the plan's research shows from the Housing Opportunities Master Plan and HOCO by Design that housing is becoming, as Dana has really said and demonstrated in his slides, more unaffordable in Howard County, and recommended zoning reforms to provide more housing and more missing middle housing. We know, again, this is not going to be the panacea and the shop that we need, but it's just another tool in the toolbox to provide just more housing choices and limiting barriers to housing options within Howard County. So again, who really benefits from accessory dwelling units? Again, Dana had laid out a lot of this. So just quickly to reiterate, primarily homeowners who live in their homes. So, the primary owner, and then whoever they may be housing in the accessory dwelling unit, whether it's a senior or a young adult. And it's a source of additional rental income potentially, or just another family member just to expand that living space for them in that accessory dwelling unit. It helps middle to lower income tenants with more affordable unit price points, older adults, entry-level professionals who are looking to live in Howard County, but may not have found something desirable for them in the areas they want to live in. And then secondarily, it really does help local businesses with having employee housing stock so many times, especially because I sit on the econ task force for Howard County. A lot of employers are having trouble with employees living close enough to their workplace where they're struggling to get that workforce into butts and seats in their places of employment because we just don't have the housing stock, especially in our service-based industry. So again, having affordable housing in Howard County really helps fill that gap. Real estate firms by adding that rental stock, residential contractors, and lending institutions. So ADUs in Howard County today, we only allow them in two different forms: as accessory apartments within the home, or attached to the primary principal structure by a common wall. And these are allowed by rights. Or we allow them in this very interesting manner, which is the temporary accessory family dwelling. And this is a conditional use that has to be as a detached, removable modular dwelling structure, or converted at the time that its temporary usage has expired. And that's via a conditional use petition, which again has a cost and a time factor, which is another barrier to entry. I'll just point out on this slide too that since we've been keeping track through our permitting process since 2015, we've only had 220 ADU permits given out in Howard County. So we already allow accessory dwelling units in Howard County in our residential districts. We're just suggesting allowing more varieties of accessory dwelling units within Howard County. So how are accessory dwelling units? Again, I've explained to them verbally, but I'm just going to show you in the schematic here that we allow them by rights. The guardrails we currently have in place are that they're only permitted on owner-occupied lots. The size limitation is up to 1/3 of the net floor area, or up to the maximum of 1,500 square feet, and no more than 2 bedrooms. And we currently do have parking requirements in place of 1 parking space. So this is typical of how we currently allow them on the interior of a unit. And then if you have the accessory apartment as described under the conditional use 2, it would be lots under 12,000 square feet, you could allow them as well. So again, of the temporary accessory family dwelling, which is the detached that we were just describing, that's a conditional use, which is a minimum of 2 acres in certain zones. It's a removable modular structure. It's a maximum size of 1,000 square feet. And then the other condition that must be met, it's for a person who is 62 years or older, or if they're 18, they have to have some type of physical, mental, or developmental impairment. So again, it's a conditional use meeting these conditions criteria in place to be able to be allowed as that accessory detached structure. So where are they allowed today? As you can see on the map, everywhere blue is where they are currently allowed today, and in 9 of our various zoning districts that are listed here. So that's really 91.5 if you want to get precise about it, percent of the county that already allows for accessory apartments. And that's currently how they are presented and defined in our zoning code. And we'll keep using the terminology accessory dwelling units, and we'll talk about how that's going to be changing with the Zoning Regulation Amendment. And so where will they be allowed with the proposed amendment to the zoning regulation? Just adding an additional 2,600 acres, or a 1.5% increase of the overall total county land. So you can see in orange. And that's an additional 11 districts. So for 20 districts now, where the ADUs would now be allowed. So again, the blue is where we allowed them currently, and then just adding the orange, which is the remaining districts that allow single family detached housing, is how the law in the state law provided for this regulation amendment. So getting back to how we currently allow them too, I would just give you the example that this is how we allow them currently as a single family attached. So we allow them, if you look at the schematic here, we allow them interior. So the first 2 examples, the blue demonstrates where accessory dwelling units are currently allowed in our zoning code. The second schematic is how we also allow them currently, how they are along a common wall of a home. So really it's the third schematic where it's the detached and separated from the house is what we're proposing with this zoning regulation amendment with additional guardrails in place. So ADUs can be attached or detached within the existing principal dwelling. So we've already gone over that. And ADUs have a maximum size equivalent to 75% of the lot coverage of the principal dwelling. And that was in the state law that they set that cap. So it's a little bit different than the cap that we have in place in Howard County. So we will be increasing that particular size maximum from 1/3 to 75%. The other cap that's being lifted is the number of bedrooms. So no maximum number of bedroom is in this current proposal of our zoning regulation amendment. Currently, we have a 2-bedroom maximum, but that will really, the guardrail will be really set into place with the size limitation, as well as you still have to meet the bulk requirements of the underlying zoning district. Permit zoning, the ZRA proposal has permits that we would be using for an ADU in any district that allows single family detached, single family attached, semi-detached, and 2-family dwellings. And it removes the conditional use categories for 2-family dwellings, accessory apartments, and temporary accessory family dwellings. So what does that mean? So what it means is that we will be allowing accessory dwelling units at single family detached residential districts, single-family attached, semi-detached, and two-family dwellings. So if you have a single-family attached, such as a townhome or a duplex, we would be allowing accessory dwelling units either attached or detached, but you would still be regulated by the bulk lot requirements. So even in a townhome type district, you would still be allowed to have an accessory dwelling unit, but they would be more in terms of interior accessory dwelling units. If they were exterior, they would be more akin to a like an alley type of garage type structure. And in a more modern setting, I would use the analogy of something similar to maybe like a maple lawn, where they do have the offset alley garages that could be potentially converted into an ADU. But we would not see detached ADUs in the 80s or 90s style townhome communities for those, because they would not meet the bulk regulations, but they could be in a basement unit of some of those townhome communities. And then a two-family dwelling, we removed the conditional use category for two-family dwellings, but that conditional use category for two-family dwellings, one of the, I think the misnomers is that a conditional use is not a use by right. It is a use by right. The only difference is that you have conditions imposed upon it. And for our two-family conditional uses where they're allowed, and I'll show a table with where two-family dwellings are currently allowed, and that's all we're allowed still just from conditional to permitted, is only had to do with what the use looked like. It had nothing to do with any other guardrails regarding lot sizes or driveway access or anything like that. So the conditional use was not setting any other additional standards to those two-family dwellings. And then remove conditional use because we're removing the accessory apartments under 12,000 square feet, and we're removing temporary accessory family dwellings because they are no longer necessary with this zoning regulation proposal. And with the state regulations, we will be also looking at the accessory dwelling units will now be exempt from lot coverage restrictions, will not be included in any density calculations. So for instance, if the underlying zoning is 4 units per acre and you have 4 lots on a 1-acre property and 2 of them have accessory dwelling units, you would not consider that 6 units per that particular acre. It would still be 4 units per acre because those accessory dwelling units, as they say, are accessory to the primary principal structure and are not considered as part of that calculation. One of the things that we have always done, or in the last 10 years especially, is we do have a permitting process for accessory apartments. So we will be continuing that with accessory dwelling units. And so you would have to provide a floor plan, whether it's interior, accessory dwelling unit, or if it's an exterior, you would have to have a plot plan with the size of the accessory dwelling unit to make sure you're still within the regulations set forth with the 75%, and within the bulk requirements of the underlying zoning district, and that you have parking available. We have parking requirements for accessory dwelling units where you have to have 1 off-street parking space for an accessory dwelling unit. And you're going to have to show off on-site water conveyance. So it would not fall under stormwater management regulations. However, we would want to make sure that water would be conveyed properly when you're building a detached structure to make sure you're not interfering with any other concerns with neighbors. And you would have to demonstrate design compatibility with the primary dwelling and the community as well. So this is a quick comparison table of what we currently have and how the ZRA will be amending those regulations. So again, must be owner occupancy barrier is being removed. The maximum number of bedroom barrier is being removed. Changing the size limitation of the accessory dwelling unit, which is a state requirement. Continuing with the number of parking spaces, which was a state requirement to have parking be thought out and thoughtful, and we already have that within our code. And then removing, since we no longer are concerned with having attached ADUs, we are allowing detached as well. We don't need to worry about the common wall attachment concern. And then separation from the principal dwelling is no longer a concern since we also have detached as part of this proposal. And then you would still need a county permit would be required for these units. And again, you would still have to have these units sprinkled and meet all current county building code standards for sprinklers and anything else that will come with new construction. If it's detached, if it's attached, you'd still have to meet all code requirements for internal accessory dwelling units as you would today, as our current standards are today. And again, as I said earlier, for the two-family dwelling component, it's a conditional use in the RC, RR, RAD, R20, and R12 districts. It would just be moving those to permitted with no minimum lot size under RC, RR, and R20. And then with a lot size requirement in the RED and R12. And again, those conditional units, the conditions only had to deal with compatibility of the character of the neighborhood and the materials that were used. And so they were not onerous conditional use requirements that had tremendous detailing and conditions that had to be applied to those two-family dwelling units on those properties. So again, Dana had went over a lot of the types of what ADUs look like and multiplex infill housing. So I'll go through these, just showing you what some of this would look like. And then zoning districts updated for accessory dwelling units, as you can see from the chart here. Again, the accessory apartments, attached accessory apartments and detached family dwellings, though it looks like it's a big change as the map demonstrated, it's only 1.5% change in what we currently allowed in the overall land area of Howard County. These are the district changes in which now these are went from a conditional and some accessory uses to all accessory uses. So again, these aren't going to replace your single family detached units or attached units. These are just accessory to the primary principal structure. But I hope we can try to bust some of the myths of some of the frequently heard concerns. So ADUs are only suitable for large properties. So, again, I think this is a myth that can be easily kind of busted, that ADUs can really be designed to fit a variety of sizes, many communities across the country. And I've seen this, in Madison, Wisconsin, Los Angeles is using a lot of accessory dwelling units. Our neighbors over in Montgomery County built several successful communities with Kentlands and King Farm, where ADUs were actually as part of when I'm a person coming in to buy a home, I could choose an accessory dwelling unit as a detached from my home to be put on these 1/8-acre lots. And it fit really nicely in with the character of the community. And they are constructed on these smaller spaces to maximize housing opportunities and to help address these concerns. So, again, with thoughtful planning, site design, they definitely can be built on smaller lots. As a matter of fact, I have a next door neighbor. I live on a smaller 1/4-acre lot size, and they put an ADU in next door, and it looks phenomenal. And I wouldn't even know it's there. So, they can be done in a really thoughtful way. There won't be enough parking for accessory dwelling units, and we hear this a lot. Again, in our current code, we have parking standards. You have to have one off-street parking per accessory dwelling unit, and you can only have one ADU per lot. So it's not, I know there was some discussions about if you had a two-family dwelling, you could have an ADU per unit. You can't. It's only one ADU per lot. So, parking will be handled, and with new development that would be contemplated for at the build, And then retrofitting and infill, you would have to have enough parking to have accessory dwelling units, off-street parking. So again, hopefully ADUs require the same additional parking spaces as our current accessory apartments do today. And there's multiple ways where you could fit that parking in within your community to make sure that parking would not be problematic with accessory dwelling units. And again, I think there's some assumptions made that as soon as legislation gets passed, that there would be a proliferation of ADUs just, coming out of the woodwork. And again, we've seen to our neighbors to the west in Montgomery County is when they passed similar legislation several years ago, they've seen an uptick, but to the extent that it has been, not even doubled the amount that they'd seen prior to their legislation being passed. ADUs are only for rental income. And I think here's a good example too of an accessory dwelling unit on a small lot in someone's backyard that just is equivalent to the size of a shed, very nicely done as well. So, no, so it's not only for rental income. Obviously, we have multi-generational living right now. I've heard some news reports recently. Obviously people are staying in their homes much longer because housing is expensive. Interest rates are still high. People are aging in place. So housing turnover is not like it used to be. So people are choosing to stay in their home. So then their young adults are coming to move back home, but they may not want to live in mom's and dad's basement or parents' basement. So they may want to have something a little independent. And so they go to live in the accessory dwelling unit. Or they may have a family member that just needs an alternative living space. So it's just not for this rental income, especially if you're going to be in such close proximity to someone. You may want it to be a more intimate member of a family or a close friend or someone who is a trusted person who you know. So it's just not for rental income generation. Or it might be a caretaker. You may have a caretaker for yourself as you age in place that you would want to live on site. And it might be cheaper for you to do that than to live in a continuing care facility or something of that nature. ADU laws make it impossible to build. So, whoops, this might have been true in the past, but new state legislation has made it easier for homeowners to build accessory dwelling units. Obviously, the state of Maryland has put in this legislation. This accessory dwelling unit legislation has been building for years. They have had committees, I think 5 General Assembly sessions to move ADU legislation forward. And this was the first year it was successful by the Maryland General Assembly to get something through for local governments to take this seriously as a gentle density added in for local jurisdictions to move the needle. And so this was just again, a tool in the toolbox to move things forward with our housing crisis. ADUs ruin the character of the neighborhood. And again, they don't have to. I don't think anyone wants to have monstrosities built next to their home. I think the idea is that these can be really done tastefully in a nice way where you can have them integrated within your community. The guardrails that are in place as far as your bulk requirements for the detached, the attached, you would never know that they're there because they're internal to your current home. You wouldn't know that that particular unit is there. And again, the bulk requirements, setbacks and height and other issues would be handled. And in some cases, they may not even be allowed because you can't fit it to meet those requirements. But there's ways that we can help look to visualize those impacts to help continue to have that character within your community. So again, I know Dana's going to show more of this, but here's the link to the zoning amendment. We have our technical staff report posted. And so he's going to go ahead and share that information with you. And we're going to go get to some Q&A now.
Yep, in just a moment. So thank you, Linda. That was very informative.
Sure.
Before we get to Q&A, that's coming in just a moment, we want to be very clear about the Coalition Steering Committee's view on this this amendment. And you can see it in bold print here that we strongly support ZRA-218, which would allow ADUs as an accessory use by right in all residential zones. So that is the position of the steering committee, and we hope coalition members will agree with that and testify accordingly. And we'll give you some details on how to do that in a few minutes. Let's get to some questions. We'll do Q&A up until right before the 8 o'clock hour, and then we do have a little bit of information for you about the October 16th Planning Board hearing, so we hope you'll stick around for that. Yes, the slides will go out tomorrow. It'll go out in the form of a video. If I'm feeling really exuberant, I will package up the slides as a PDF show for you guys as well. So I'll get information out to you tomorrow, including the advocacy information, but you can get a taste of it here this evening in a few minutes. Jackie, do you want to queue up some questions for us?
I do have some questions, and thank everyone for being interactive and listening. And let's start out with one. And Linda and Dana, maybe we can just go to. Well, I guess we're still in presenter mode, right? Okay.
I can turn that on.
Linda, I'll throw them out to you, and you can respond to them, or throw them out to Jeff, Justin, as you need to. Oh, I like that, Dana.
Okay. The octopus, I guess, huh? Sorry.
Right.
All right, I will stop.
Linda, first question. What percentage of homes building ADUs in the area, what percentage of homes currently build ADUs in the areas where they're legal?
And can you say that again, where they're legal or
where they're allowed? Do
so,
we know
we only have
what percentage of homes currently have ADUs
in
our community?
The ones that the ones we know of are that we know that there's 220 that we have tracked so far.
Okay, thank you.
What percentage? I haven't done a percentage of how many housing units we have in the county in relation to how many ADUs, but there's 220 that we've tracked since 2015 in the county. We've been keeping track.
Okay, and I think that's something that I don't have that number in my head right this moment, but I think that's actually something we may be able to feedback to our listeners and everything. All right, next question. We have a septic system and a well. How would this be implemented in our area?
For a particular person that has well and septic, so it depends.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you're on well and septic, my understanding is if it's attached, obviously you would just hook in. It'd be like having an addition onto your home. And you would just hook in, if it's appropriately sized, your well and septic, you would just tap into your current well and septic system. If it's detached and you would have to meet health department regulations, it probably would be a little prohibitive because you probably have to put in a new well and a new septic, just depending on what the health department says. So it would really depend on your soils, how you perk, and what your well is like.
Thank you. How will this new zoning law play out with APBO school capacity issues, requirements?
It would not, because it would not be considered a full dwelling unit. It would be exempt from APBO schools.
Okay.
Unless something were to change with the law, but as of now, we don't put accessory apartments. So we would be following the same law that we currently have on the book. So accessory apartments don't follow APBO. Thank you. So it would be no change to our current law.
Okay, in areas that currently allow ADUs, what's been the actual use of the regulations? Do some price ranges or lot sizes take advantage of the regulations more than others?
We haven't done a breakdown of statistics of the 220 that we know of to know, but we can get that information to see where specifically they are in the zoning districts in which they lie in, to see who has taken more advantage of them. So that's something we can look into. We just have not done yet.
Okay, so maybe that's something we can follow up with.
100%.
Got it. Can you address those neighborhoods that already have drainage issues and what would govern building an ADU in those circumstances?
So, I mean, we have stormwater management regulations. I mean, we would have to take it on a case by case basis if a community already has drainage issues. I mean, I think that's something that we would just have to talk about on separately as to where those drainage issues are. But as I said earlier, we will be making sure as they come in with applications as far as water conveyance, making sure that that water, for that particular addition, or if it's a separate accessory dwelling unit as a detached, and that's making the assumption it's going to be a detached, that it conveys and flows properly away from any other issues to any nearby homes.
Okay. Does the state law require one off-street parking space? Or is that Howard County ZRA only? Could Howard County not require any parking for ADUs if it wanted to?
Well, it's already in our county code. We already have, so again, we already allow accessory dwelling units in 90% of the county, internal as attached. So we already have parking requirements established. This CRA does not propose changing that. So we still are having the allowance of one off-street parking. So we're not changing that. The state law requires us to have parking as part of our code requirements, in which we already do. So I hope that clarifies.
Okay. Some state ADU laws allow by right subdivision of a lot that an ADU is built on, so the ADU can be sold separately. Has that been considered in Howard County?
No.
Okay. Thank you for making it easier to do an ADU. The earlier low number of permits highlights the complexity. Am I correct that the new rule would be by right for older homes in Oakland Mills and older areas? Will a costly architect and lawyer be required to develop the plan? Will professional staff or community members make the decisions on design compatibility?
So, I mean, it depends on how they want to build it. So I would say this, you're not going to have to go through any additional steps. It would be a permitted use. So as far as that goes, but you would still have to pull your necessary building permits. If it's on water and sewer, you would still have to hook into your current home's water and sewer system, however that is. So you'd have to still pull all the necessary building permits. You would have to meet all the required building standards, and that does mean sprinkler systems. So under today's standards, single family, all residential units have to have fire suppression. So you would have to you would have to have fire suppression. So you have to meet all the building code standards, setback requirements. This does not preclude any of that. So, you would have to have an architect or a site engineer if you're going to do detached, just as you would for any project, develop this for you. So I guess it depends on how you want to develop your ADU. That would be your decision to make.
Thank you, Lena. All right, we have a few more questions.
Sure.
I'm gonna pause right now and give Dana an opportunity. We want to honor people that we said this would be 7 to 8. We will be here to take questions after that, but we have a little bit of how to advocate for this first. And once Dana finishes this, we'll come back to the questions.
Thank you,
for those
Jackie.
of you who want to stay longer.
Yeah, thank you. This will just take a minute. So you've heard a reference to the October 16th meeting of the Planning Board that is coming up next week. they will make a recommendation to the county council for consideration in November, as you heard earlier on. The coalition supports, the steering committee supports this amendment. We hope that you will as well. And if you want to advocate, here are ways to do this. And this will be repeated in the follow-up emails to everyone. We'll have some links to the DPZ's petition to the planning board and the technical staff report accompanying the petition. The meeting is on the 16th at 7 p.m. in the George Howard Building, the HOCO government building in Ellicott City. There is a live stream. The link is here. And again, that'll be in the email tomorrow. We would like for you to testify in person if available. If not, you can testify by email by sending your testimony to the planning board at the address shown here. If you're going to show up and testify, you need to register to do that. You can testify online. The link is here. And again, in the follow-up materials. If you're going to testify in person, you can sign up right at the door by 7 p.m. You have 3 minutes either way, however you testify to get your point across. And just some suggested talking points. We've covered a lot of these things today. We need more housing. We need to do something about our housing shortage in Howard County. As Linda said, this is not a panacea, but it can help. Every little bit will help, and we hope you will support the push to liberalize the zoning regime around ADUs and support this amendment. So let me stop sharing, and we'll go back to the Q&A. And we want to thank anybody who needs to drop off for attending tonight, and see you down the road.
Okay. Back to you, Linda. Off-street parking requirements will make it impossible to build ADUs on many lots. How can this be addressed?
As far as not, I guess, so I'm assuming the question means that we're not going to have enough parking with the off-street parking requirements. How can it be addressed? And so that's a great question. You know, I think with any legislation, you know, there has to be some type of guardrail. So this is one of the guardrails that the state asked to have some type of parking study issue requirements to be put in place. So of course, you know, would serve something we had in the code, and we wanted to keep true to what our current code said as much as possible, because we already had, you know, studies done in the past of like, what are good parking minimums and maximums to have in. That being said, we do offer relief to be done when it comes to parking requirements. So if, you know, someone came in and said, I can't meet the one additional space off-street parking requirement, you can always submit to us a parking reduction study of sorts and saying, I can't meet the one additional space off-street parking for my accessory dwelling unit. We can't fit it in for whatever reason. And then you could demonstrate via a study, so to speak, saying, look, we are in a TOD with walking, biking, and other types of facilities nearby and the person who we're housing in our ADU, you could even suggest, you know, doesn't even drive. So there's really no need for our particular situation to have an additional off-street parking space. And we don't drive, we don't have cars. So I think there's always ways that we can offer relief when it comes to that on case-by-case situations to help in those where that could be a concern. But it
Linda,
is a guardrail offered on a greater level, because we do have situations in certain communities where parking already is a concern. So we want to be sensitive to both concerns.
Linda, we have a related question. HB 1466 includes, before adopting a local law under paragraph 1 of this subsection, a legislative body shall complete a parking study to determine the applicable needs and restrictions in the jurisdiction. How is this provision being implemented? A parking study needs to address a discrete area, not the whole county? Question.
So we, again, because we already have parking in our code, because we've already addressed accessory dwelling units, the need to do an entire parking study was not needed.
Okay. In Newtown zoning, how do ADUs impact the percentage of residential units permitted?
Not sure I quite understand that question, meaning that they have some, I guess I'm just not sure what they mean. That is the question, that they have permitted residential units still out there, and
Not,
how many more ADUs can be built with those permitted units?
Um,
it's not
I
clear,
mean,
but while we're trying to figure out here in the background, there are a couple of questions also related to Newtown. Will they be allowed in Newtown? Continue to
yes.
be allowed? Yep.
So yes, they will be allowed in Newtown zoning, because Newtown zoning, even though it wasn't explicitly called out in the zoning regulation amendment, the residential suburban cluster governs residential zoning within the Newtown district, and then the FDP for and the specific residential districts called out also govern the single family districts, or the single family zoning, residential zoning, I should say, excuse me, in those particular areas. So that is how the accessory use of accessory dwelling units is being regulated and applied in Newtown.
So a related question is, what if the final development plan, the FDP, doesn't mention or allow ADUs?
Well, ADUs would never be specifically called out because it's accessory.
Okay.
So accessory follows on with the primary principal use of the residence,
So it's based off
residential.
what
Yeah.
RSC, it's what RSC allows. So if RSC, whatever the accessory use setback requirements are, the height requirements in RSC are, that's what would govern Newtown for accessory uses.
Thanks,
Thank
Jeff.
you, Jeff. Yeah, appreciate that clarification.
all right. Do you know what the experience has been in places like Portland, Oregon, where they allow ADUs by right? How many have actually been built?
I do not. I have not investigated Portland, Oregon specifically.
I will show you.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I just did a little digging.
That's
This is
awesome.
from accessorydwellings.org.
Wow.
They've been operating out in Oregon for last 7 or 8 years, and
Yeah, I know they have a robust market for them.
I trust this site, this source. So this is data mining that they did. So you can see the curve, and it's not quite a hockey stick curve in Oregon, but this only goes through 2022. And in 2022, it may be hard to read, but 636 permits. More of a hockey stick here in the state of Washington. That's across the state, over 2,000. And this is California, 2020 through 2023. So 24,000 permits in the year 2022. And that's before they liberalized those zoning laws further and allowed more ADUs. So it takes a while. You see the long buildup here from 2010. You could count them on a hand for the first few years, but certainly more uptake as people learn more.
And I always think it's important to take a look at the jurisdiction and other things other than just permit numbers in terms of their demographics, how much land they have, how many houses they already have. Is this a percentage of population or whatever? But we do see that they have been successful and added a considerable amount of affordable housing in those jurisdictions. Another question. How many accessory apartments are there in the county that did not require a conditional use? Do we know?
So again, that's that 220 number that we have. Okay. So the conditional use was only required for the detached temporary, and actually there's only one that we've had come through that process.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Can a developer gain with a new greenfield development building, single family, and then add ADUs to each lot?
Can a developer do what? I'm sorry, I missed the first part.
game the rules, use the rules to build new and then add ADUs.
Well, not after they're built. I mean, if they're in the development process and if they're in the planning process and they have plans, they can always, and this legislation passes, let's just say, they can always amend their plans. They can always retract their plans completely, come back in and redo their plans. There's no prohibition on that. But if they already have a done development, that would be up to the individual property owners then to do that.
Thank you. Can mobile homes, and I'm going to kind of expand that to modular homes, be used as ADUs?
So the state law that was passed in 24 via the Housing Expansion and Affordability Act made it so that modular homes, you can't discriminate how housing is built in the state of Maryland any longer. So you can't discriminate versus stick built or modular built. So there is no reason that an accessory dwelling unit cannot be a modular structure put on a property. But again, it has to fit within what we call the bulk regulation. So that's the size and setback within the base zoning district in which it sets. So for instance, if it's too big and it's going to be into the setback requirement of a neighboring property, then it won't be allowed. So it has nothing to do with the housing structure. It has to do with, does it fit onto that particular lot?
Okay. Will the new Howard County ADU law overrule any restrictions from Columbia Association regulations?
So the way the law is written, they can't be prohibited. You can't prohibit via deed is how the law is written, deed or covenant restricted. Now, I'm not an attorney, so I don't want to go beyond my expertise, but my understanding of the law is that you can't prohibit accessory dwelling units, but I believe you, and I would again check with anyone who's in a homeowners association or any of your covenants, I would just caveat it that they can probably still have to maintain certain like architectural review discretion.
Okay. This one seems a little big, but can you go over minimum lot sizes by zone or type of house, please? Many single-family homes in Columbia are less than 10,000 square feet.
So I think what we could do is if they could send that in an email separately, we could work with zoning perhaps to point them in the right direction to our code and show them where that information can be found or work with them on it, on getting some information for them. That's too much to go through online this evening.
I will, I'll make sure that we get that to you and we get the answer back to.
Yeah, happy to work on that for them.
Make that connection.
Okay.
Will the addition of an ADU impact real estate tax assessments?
Well, anytime you do an improvement to your property, that's going to change your tax assessment. By how much? It just depends, I guess, on how your property is being assessed by the tax assessor in your triennial assessment.
Okay. Can an easement to park on a neighbor's lot meet the extra ADU offsite requirement?
I can't answer that question. I don't. Yeah. I can't. Yeah.
We'll put that on our list of things to see if we can get that addressed.
Sure.
All right. I just see a couple of more.
Sure.
The new requirement does not require owner occupied. Does this mean the primary and ADU may both be rental?
Correct.
Okay. And the last question that
just does the primary owner doesn't have to be there. You could have a family member living there. Doesn't mean you have to have it for monetary exchange, so.
Can a separate ADU unit be sold separately from a main structure?
Well, you know, we don't determine how someone manages or sells their property. I guess if you were to, you can't subdivide it off, I'll say that. But I guess if someone wanted to condoize it, that's a, that is a, that's a, I guess a contractual issue. And we don't regulate that in zoning, but as far as subdividing it and selling it, that is not allowed. That's prohibited. If that makes sense.
Okay. All right. Dana, I am not seeing any other questions. So I think I will turn it back over to you.
I've got nothing.
Well, I'm glad we
We're
got
done.
through them all. I
What-
appreciate that.
Let's just double check at the bottom of the Q&A. Yep. Good job, Jackie. Yep, I think we got everything. Well, thank you for all the
Excellent.
great questions, Linda. Thank you for being patient with us and
Sure.
staying extra time and being so informative this evening. We want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Hope you will show up on October 16th and get your testimony in other ways if you're not able to be there in person.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. And please, please come out on the 16th. It's planning board, but, we package this all together and send it to council. So every touch point, is important to have your voice heard if you're supportive of this. A lot of times we hear from people who aren't supportive, which, every voice is important. But if you're supportive, we definitely want to hear from you. So thank you all so much for your time this evening. And thank you for having me and Jeff and Justin here this evening. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Our pleasure.
Great.
All right. With that, good night, all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks again.
Good night.